Okay, so first up we have Mr. Paul Schaefer. He wanted to speak on multiple items this evening. So in a discussion I had with him earlier, I suggested he could make those at this time rather than speaking on each of those individual
Okay,
items.
thank you. Yes.
Good evening. We've got a full agenda tonight of some pretty important items. And of course, you know, I've filled your inboxes with several emails on several of those topics, but I wanted to get an opportunity to come and stand before you and before the public and make a statement with regards to some of those items. And hopefully inform you very clearly on my position. I'm opposed to item 10B on tonight's agenda, an ordinance to amend certain sections of the City of Huber Heights Code regarding home occupations. The amendment allows for the expanding of the current definition of allowable home occupations. I take issue with expanding home businesses to include the utilization of one additional person who does not reside at the home where the occupation takes place. In my opinion, home businesses that have grown or that require the utilization of one or more additional people who do not reside in the home have outgrown the home as an appropriate place for conducting business and should relocate to an area zoned to conduct business. I take issue with the addition of one non-illuminated sign being permitted in on the principal building of a homes business. These are our residences. Our neighborhoods are residentially zoned areas within our communities. They are not substitutes for strip malls and other appropriate business locations. Signage is a tool used to increase business traffic, and I can't believe we want to encourage more transient traffic in our residential neighborhoods by permitting storefront advertising. I take issue with allowing home businesses to have more than one customer, including those customers arriving and waiting for service at any one time. My opposition is due to the potential impacts on neighborhood character and impacts on residential zone properties already with congested streets. Additionally, I have heard no discussion regarding who is going to police these requirements and where the resources are going to come to do so. I'm opposed to item 10C on tonight's agenda, an ordinance amending the City Code of Huber Heights regarding the bed and breakfast establishments. Proposed standard 2 of the amendment states, the owner of the premise shall reside full-time in the dwelling while operating guest lodging. The requirement for the owner to be on the premise to reside full-time in the dwelling must be cleaned up to be clear and enforceable. I have previously suggested such wording. The proposed wording in the legislation before you would allow the owner to be on vacation while the premises are in use while still maintaining the legal definition of being a full-time resident, at least from a tax and residency requirements perspective. The current wording is not in alignment with my current understanding of the intent of this requirement for the owner to be home when they have clients there. The proposed amendment to 1123-141 bed and breakfast establishments, specifically Standard 7, says there shall be no change in the outside appearance of the building or premises or other visible evidence of the conduct of the bed and breakfast establishment that will indicate from the exterior of the building that it's being used for any other purpose other than as a dwelling unit. This is inconsistent with the proposed legislation found in TA 2242-1 and amendments to Ordinance 1181-26A7, home occupations, which states one non-illuminated sign with a maximum square footage of 4 square feet is permitted without permit if it is mounted flat against the wall of the principal building. That amendment is also scheduled for a vote on tonight's City's Council meeting. The inconsistency between the bed and breakfast being an allowable home occupation, but the only home occupation not allowed to have an exterior signage appears inappropriate. As a minimum, this situation should result in the tabling of this ordinance amendment until that inconsistency is resolved. I'm opposed to item 10D on tonight's agenda, an ordinance amending the City of Huber Heights Code regarding automotive vehicle repair facilities. The proposed legislation proposes a standard which states in part, the storage of non-operational vehicles for longer than 1 week shall be prohibited. Vehicles must be able to move at least 100 feet under their own power within 24 hours notice of the city. There's an internal inconsistency in these two sentences found within the same proposed standard. If it is allowable for a vehicle in repair to be non-operational for less than a week, but for more than a day, then it is, and it's awaiting parts, it could be unreasonable to require the vehicle to be able to be moved under its own power within 24 hours. At a minimum, council should table this ordinance until that inconsistency is resolved. Although I have and continue to advocate for a straight-up no vote on this item resulting from my environmental and unintended consequences concerns. I'm opposed to item 11E on the agenda, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Malott Industries for the purposes of distributing a grant associated with the Economic Development Government Equity Agreement between the City of Huber Heights and Montgomery County. Read-ahead materials provided on this topic state that the resolution authorizes monies provided for the grant in the amount of $62,400 to be provided via supplemental appropriation, and that only after Malott Industries demonstrates its compliance with the terms of the conditions of the grant, the city will be reimbursed for the amount of $62,400 from Montgomery County. This makes the city, and therefore the residents of the city, responsible and accountable for the performance of Malott Industries. Malott Industries certainly seems to be of size sufficient to perform services and be paid upon successful completion and not in need of forward financing. It's my opinion that Malott Industries should be paid when the county grant funds become available, and the city funds should not be placed at risk with yet another advance from the general funds. I'm opposed to item 11F on the agenda, supplemental appropriations. To be clear, I'm in opposition to specific elements of the supplemental appropriations, not all of them. Specifically, I'm opposed to the transfer of $400,000 from the sewer fund to the sewer capital fund for the East Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. These funds should be used to support the current infrastructure requirements, with the current customers coming first. If and only if there are excess funds beyond those required for sustainment, should those funds be made available for investment in growth and expansion. As I understood it, funding for the East Sanitary Sewer Extension Project was to be sourced from the city's sewer project fund in the amount of $2.75 million. This money was collected from existing customers and should have been used to defer the costs of existing infrastructure needs and not for growth investment. But that is water under the bridge, if you'll excuse the pun. This increase represents an approximate 15% cost growth in this effort before the contract award, at a time when the city is grappling with sewer and water rate increases to support necessary infrastructure repair, modernization, expansion, and replacement necessary to sustain the existing residents. This transfer results in an unfair financial burden being placed on the city's current residents that will have to be made up with larger rate increases. This funding could be used to dilute required rate increases and support the current infrastructure needs. Future speculative revenues from investments in growth don't address immediate concerns over rising homeowners' bills. Approving the course in this legislation demonstrates what I call a lack of balance between growth and infrastructure maintenance. I'm opposed to the expenditure of the $525,000 as an advance from the general fund to the capital improvement fund to purchase land for the new public works facility. This funding, if available, should be used to support requirements for sustainment, modernization, and repair of existing water distribution system. Approval for this capital improvement project should be deferred until permanent financing is secured by the city through the issuance of bonds at a future date. The city has an immediate need for these dollars to address more important, higher priority issues, at least from a public perspective. The city's proclivity to use future legislation to convert advances to transfers without accountability, in my opinion, makes funding this advance unacceptably high risk. If you doubt this, look no further than today's agenda item 11G. On tonight's agenda, authorizing a one-time transfer of monies from a gasoline tax fund to document an advance previously made to Carriage Hill Trails Infrastructure Fund because an anticipated SIB loan was not obtained. As mentioned earlier, I'm opposed to the proposed $62,400 advance for the general fund, capital improvement fund for initial funding of the Malata Industries. I encourage the council to fund this effort when the grant proceeds are received. These general funds should either continue to generate interest revenue in the general fund or be applied to higher priority financial needs as needed in the city. I conditionally support items 11G, an ordinance increasing the sewer rates. The condition is elimination of the transfer of the $440,000 from the sewer fund to the sewer capital fund for the East Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. That funding generated from existing user fees should be used first to offset future rate increases necessary to support the existing infrastructure. I would like to see a commitment from this council to support that objective without delaying tonight's proposed rate increase, as we all know future increases are also coming, and this funding could be used to offset and defer those future increases. I'm opposed to the approval of item 11N on tonight's agenda, authorizing a contract for the East Sanitary Sewer Extension Project. As covered before, I'm opposed to the transfer that should be used for the sustainment of the existing infrastructure. Entering a contract without having identified an acceptable revenue source should not be allowed. This is an agenda item and should be deferred until a balanced funding strategy is found. My comments really are addressing two topics which I've addressed before, and that is balance and character of our neighborhoods. I hope you'll understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
And we have one other citizen